Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our 10 a.m. session, a conversation with Anne Wojcicki, CEO of 23andMe, and our moderator, Meg Tirrell, Senior Health and Senior Science Reporter for CNBC. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Anne, let's dive right in. It's great to see you. I think most people are probably familiar with 23andMe, but let's go back to the beginning. You founded this company in 2006. Maybe just tell us about what the vision was for 23andMe, and has it changed since then?
I'm very lucky in that the vision that we had for the company in some ways hasn't necessarily changed that much since those early days. And the path to get to that vision has evolved. Clearly, things like the FDA warning letter and other things were part of the path of evolution, but the vision has actually stayed very, very true to what we actually started out with. So prior to starting 23andMe, I was working as an investment analyst on Wall Street, and I was investing in healthcare companies and mostly biotech companies. And I kind of realized that, healthcare was not really about the consumer. Like, healthcare is a B2B world. And you have the doctors and the hospitals and the insurance companies and the pharma companies and the PBMs. Like, there's all these companies that discuss you, but no one ever talks to you. And I almost found it was almost like a communist system. Like, you have this big brother organization that is making all these decisions for you, and you're treated like you're totally incapable of having any kind of meaningful input. So I found it just, again, after 10 years, I found that it not only necessarily did sometimes the wrong things for you, but it was sort of insulting in how much the system assumes that you are incapable of taking care of yourself. So I was really inspired by the HIV community and what they did to really make a difference in drug discovery and taking care of themselves and advocating for the right, reimbursement, like everything to actually have a meaningful difference in HIV. And I realized, like, these other communities that had, walks and ribbons, like, it was too passive. Like, we needed to create an opportunity for people to own their information and to be proactive activists. And frankly, the most valuable thing that you have is like knowing that you are in charge of yourself, but also like your own data. So 23andMe really started out with this idea that I can dramatically change healthcare if, one, I just empower people and let them know they're actually in charge of themselves, but two, create sort of this community platform where people can come together, trade ideas, but also use their own information to become the world's largest research community.
Well, you mentioned that FDA letter. Maybe if folks didn't follow the story, maybe explain, sort of what that major hiccup early on in the road was.
Yeah, we had 23andMe at the beginning when we launched. It was a debate in our mind, like, do we need to go through the FDA? And we actually consulted. It's always been a debate. Like, were we just so arrogant that we didn't think we needed it, or did we really just screw up? The reality is that we actually spent a fair amount of time with, like, the former FDA commissioner and lots of senior advisors, and concluded that we did not need to go through the FDA. And as we became bigger and the information became more and more medical, it became clear that there was a tension there. And again, we always said we were sort of a square peg, round hole. And what is it? The existing medical device system didn't fit with us. But in 2013, it became very clear. I can't remember, it was 2012. It became very clear, 13, that the FDA meant business, and they sent us a very aggressive warning letter, and 23andMe had to very rapidly develop an alternative plan to how we were operating. And that warning letter essentially told us that we were no longer allowed to return the health information to our customers, and we had to take our kit and the test through the FDA process. And I think back on that, like, it has been, 5+ years, and we're still getting some of our approvals Like we still haven't launched our pharmacogenetics reports yet, which we will hopefully soon. But it was an incredible overhaul and shift for the whole company to take something that is not an FDA, regulated company and become an FDA regulated. And everything that, for people who don't realize, like your engineering team has to do things in a different way, and the way you are submitting, like everything has to change. So I'm really impressed with the team of how they were able to pivot. I think the product is much better because of it. I feel really great about our data quality, because now we actually have all this data to talk about how accurate it is, and also how much our customers can understand this information.
Well, I want to encourage folks, if they want to ask questions, I'm paying attention to the website, so we'll definitely get them in. I want to ask you about why the FDA took that tack. I mean, you were mentioning sort of the big brother approach. It was that they were worried about people getting this health information without a doctor giving it to them?
Yes, I think I can never speak for the FDA as to exactly why they've done it. And I think it's an interesting thing to note that they have not come after any other company that has done this. So there's lots of companies that use sort of the loophole, the laboratory developed test loophole. So they have sort of a physician on the back end. And, we were told explicitly we cannot do that. So I can't speak about why they decide to do that then, but I know it's very clear that there's a lot of physicians who are really believe that this information should go through them. So for example, even one of the major medical societies, this was, I think, 2 years ago now, we tried to come to their conference. And again, it's one of the major medical groups. We wanted to come to the conference just to have a booth, and they returned our check to us and said, until you actually have a physician mediated pathway, we have no interest in supporting you. And it was funny because I was looking back at the history I've had sort of with this group, and I realized, like, I had met with one of the senior leaders back in, I think, 2008. And sort of a couple of months after I'd met with that leader, that organization had put out a warning statement about us. And I realized that there are some physicians who, like, very clearly believe that they should own the domain of genetics and genetic counseling, and that it needs to go through. And I think one thing that I am really proud of our team of doing is that people will say, this needs a physician. And I'll say, well, like, why? And one thing that 23andMe can do is we actually now have the data to support that people actually can get this information on their own, and they make reasonable choices with it. And it's enough, the people, 90+% of people can understand the information and do responsible actions. So I feel really good that, you don't necessarily need to have this go through a physician or a genetic counselor.
Do you think that that approach of the doctors feeling like they need to own the genetic information is more about them feeling like people can't handle the information themselves, or is there sort of potentially a business element to it where they want to be ordering their own genetic tests and doing things like that?
I think it's both. I think one thing I learned from working again on Wall Street was that, when something really takes off in medicine, it's because there was also a financial incentive. So I've seen, and I had one doctor I remember stand up at a meeting, and he said, the biggest problem with 23andMe is you generate non-billable questions. And I have to say, like, physicians are great people. Like, they're really trying to do the right thing. And I think that my friends who are doctors today, it's a really hard job. And part of it is exactly that. Like, you don't necessarily get paid to help someone prevent type 2 diabetes. You're paid to treat type 2 diabetes. So I can't ever blame someone for not spending their time trying to prevent it, because it's not what the system does. Like, I kind of look at it as like, that's more of a business opportunity for Weight Watchers or other groups. Like, your doctor is not there to get you to really change your behavior. So again, I can't necessarily blame them that, like, it's not part of their model. And I think so. Again, I really think that there's two aspects. One is that there's a little bit of the protectionism, and I think the world is really changing. And frankly, I think COVID-19 has shown how much telemedicine and just like online resources can fill in a gap. And then I think, secondly, I think there is sort of the question of like, it's not part of our reimbursed pathway.
Scary. You mentioned COVID-19, and you guys are actually running a study here. Maybe tell us about that initiative.
Yeah, the study is, again, this kind of is where I thought about from those early days, from, again, the outside of the company, is that research is all about like bringing a huge number of people together who have a common, characteristic, a common disease or phenotype. And then you tend to set up a study and then dismantle it, and set it up and dismantle it. So my idea was like, how is it that you can actually just have, millions of people engaged continuously, so that then when you have an idea, you can just put out a survey to them. And that's really what we were able to do. COVID-19 is a nice example of what we were able to do, where on April 6th, we said we were going to launch this COVID survey. We put together the survey. And within a matter of months, we had, 750,000 people who have filled it out. We have thousands of people who said that they had it, thousands who said that they were hospitalized with it. And we were able to see, which we blogged about, is the ABO, the O blood type, which looks protective. So we are working on a publication now. There's additional findings in that. So, it's a great example of how you can very, very quickly and inexpensively make major discoveries that impact society in a real-time basis.
And I know you just mentioned that you've reached hospitalized patients. I know that was an initiative you guys had to even give away free kits to folks who'd been in the hospital. I mean, how has that recruitment gone of people with the most severe disease?
Yeah, I me'n, it's finding people who were hospitalized for severe COVID is a little bit of, finding needles in haystacks here. But I've been really happy. We're giving away 10,000 kits to individuals who were hospitalized with COVID-19, and they slowly come in. And we find them, they were already existing in our customer database, and we find others who hear about the study, and then they sign up.
So we're getting some questions. And one, I think, maybe kind of dovetails with the work that you guys are doing also in drug development. I think maybe a lot of folks don't know that you also have this potential focus. This is from Anonymous, but they ask, suppose you have a rare disease and all of your whole genome sequencing, RNA sequencing data from your doctor. How would you leverage it to get a treatment? I mean, maybe that's an N of 1 type question, not a 23andMe type question, but do you have any advice for folks who might have a rare disease and have this genetic data?
I think one of the things I've seen that's been really, and 23andMe has talked about this a bunch, and we've worked with a number of rare disease groups. I'd like to see us as a platform for people to come together and solve some of their own issues. So 23andMe might be working on a project, but we could also hopefully become a platform so that people could come, aggregate, find each other, consolidate data, and then partner with different academic groups. So, we have had a couple rare diseases that have said, they got everyone that they knew who had that same rare disease genotyped on 23andMe, and then they can at least find each other and they can share. We are definitely, it's one thing, as we have over 10 million customers now, we actually are seeing that we can find really interesting genetic discoveries in rare disease. So it's becoming more and more of a priority for us on the drug discovery side. So my recommendation for somebody who has all of their own information is, really to try and create that kind of community where people can, share all their information, and then you partner with the right academic group. And the number one thing I always point to is, you don't want any one academic group to have exclusivity. It's not in your interest to ever be exclusive with just one group. You want to be able to make sure that your information can be shared. And that was a core central thesis for 23andMe of making people, allowing people to download their genetic information. You can always download it and you can do whatever you want with it.
Well, I know you also have partnerships with larger pharmaceutical companies. And here's another question. To be honest, I'm not totally sure I understand it. Maybe you do and can help me understand it. But the question is, how open are healthcare companies to outsource their data curation and labeling services? And should they be doing it? I don't know what labeling services means exactly.
How, say the first part of it again?
How open are healthcare companies to outsource their data curation and labeling services?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it means either. I mean, I can see, so I would say, again, I don't know exactly what the question was saying, but in terms of data and outsourcing, I think that there's two things that are going on big picture. People see big data and they see dollar signs, and they see what, the retail industry has done, and Google and Facebook, and people see healthcare as the last frontier of big data that has not yet been collected.
Hmm.
And so I would say, if anything, all the hospital systems, healthcare providers, et cetera, are very resistant to doing anything that might let their data go. And I think it's a tragedy, because what people don't recognize that, Google, Facebook, others, like, their numbers are in the billions. Like, they can find incredible things because they have so much. So Stanford having, 100,000 people coming a year, or Harvard having some number, like, it's too small. Like, healthcare truly is one of those things that it's so complicated. If we don't team up in some way, we'll never make the kinds of discoveries we need to. And frankly, that's where countries like China have a huge advantage over us, because they can centralize. And I think the US has wasted a lot of time having the debates about, again, what we talked about, the FDA side, like, can people get this information? How is it going to be returned? Whereas other countries like China, like, they're crushing it. Like, they have massive amounts of data and massive number of programs, so again, it's going to become an information race about who can actually make these discoveries first.
Yeah. Well, in the US, of course, we have the All of Us initiative from NIH, which is supposed to be this big data project. And I don't know how many people have been, enrolled in that or encompassed in it. I mean, do you have any sense of how that's going? And is this an answer at all?
We spent a lot of time with NIH in those early days, talking with them about it. We're not part of it in any way, which frankly was too bad. Like, we already have a platform that's set up for collecting data. And I have not heard about people being enrolled or getting their data back, or how it's going. So we've kind of, like I said, it's an interesting, there's interesting just competition that's happening in data collection, which again is too bad. I think there should be more competition around analysis rather than collection.
That would be great. There was a period of time when, sort of after the Golden State Killer news came out, where he was sort of found through this database, that it seemed like people were hesitating to participate in genetic research like 23andMe. How has that trend been in the last, however long it's been, maybe 2 years?
Yeah, I haven't. What was interesting is people didn't consent at a lower rate. So we had fewer sales, but it didn't impact the consent rates for people participating in research. So it's really interesting, because the sales hit this peak, 2 years ago. And it was mania. Like, I look at, like, Eddie Murphy came back onto Saturday Night Live and it was amazing. And he had a whole skit on 23andMe. Like, we hit this social nirvana, yet sales dropped. And I do think that it wasn't just Golden State Killer. It was the Facebook drama. There's like all of these privacy questions of just like, where is your data going? And frankly, there was like great New York Times article about, what have your location, what have you opted into? I think that people have a sense, which I can relate to, again, like, I would like to have some kind of control over, like, where is everything going? And I think people pulled back more there, just saying, what's the rush? Let me wait and see. But frankly, we've actually really seen it come back. I think it was a dip. And I think that, again, the world, like, GDPR is out there. There's California Privacy Act. There's more attempts to have that kind of direct communication. about what's happening with your data. 23andMe has always tried to be super transparent about how information is being used. So for instance, when you're opted into research, it says very clearly on the top, you are opted into research. You always have that ability to opt out. You can always delete your account. So I think that, again, I think it was a dip, and I think there's been real momentum coming back. But Golden State, I think the Golden State Killer, like it's at a moment in time where it's really important to help to define some of these privacy laws. And that's one thing that we are really working aggressively on, is like really helping to define how this information should be collected and how it should be used.
We have another question kind of along those privacy lines. Are you concerned with insurance using the data you're compiling to start denying benefits or coverage? And I understand, I think there are some protections around health insurance, but maybe not for life insurance. And, are there any dangers to those protections potentially being eroded?
I think, Gina, there's the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. So that is the federal legislation that prevents anyone from using your genetic information against you for employment or for health insurance. And I feel pretty good about that legislation. The way 23andMe is set up, individuals control their information, and we don't do any partnerships with insurance companies. We don't connect your information to anyone else. The thing that sometimes scares me in healthcare is that if I go to the doctor, I'm not actually sure where my healthcare information goes after that. But as with 23andMe, we're pretty clear, like you own your information. You have the ability to opt into research. We do partnerships there. We try to be very transparent about what we're doing there. But I'm forgetting my train of thought.
The GINA Act and the...
Yeah. So again, I'm not... I think it's important to always be vigilant on it. So I don't worry as much on the health information or on the health insurance and employment. And on insurance, I think one thing I've heard from people who work in the insurance industry is that there's just much better information in terms of predicting life outcomes related to weight, smoking, so that there hasn't necessarily been that attempt to integrate genetics broadly in it. And frankly, one thing that we've thought about is like, if I have, again, moonshot ideas, if I know your genetic results and I know where you're high risk, and if you actually really change behaviors and put emphasis in certain areas, could we actually help you live longer and healthier? So I've always thought about, like, we actually have this opportunity to know this information and have almost the opposite kind of health insurance or a life insurance company where we say, we're actually willing to bet on you that I can make you healthy at 100. That's like almost kind of an interesting twist here with it, is that the genetic information that we're returning should help you, give you a path to how you actually could stay healthier. And then that should actually really help you live a much longer, healthier life.
I look forward to the 23andMe, life insurance partnership soon to be announced. We only have a couple minutes left, but I can't leave you without asking you about your statement at the beginning of June after George Floyd's killing in support of Black Lives Matter. And you said at the time, quote, that you were ashamed to say, I do not have a single Black employee who's at a director level or above. You also noted the product is Eurocentric, but must expand to be inclusive and equitable. It's only been 5 or 6 weeks since then, but have you put initiatives in place, or how is that changing your company?
It's had a big impact. And I think that one of the most important things to do first is for everyone to just try to unpack, what's happened and who are we and what are the things that we are doing that might be part of the problem. And frankly, the unpacking part can't be something that happens overnight, but it's going to have to take time. So we've set up, and Fred, who runs our people team, has been leading this, is the 4 pillars of like, where is it that we're going to focus? So, like, how are we hiring? And, it's very clear things like, what kind of recruiting firms are we using? And, we might be finding people who are like us because we're using recruiters that are similar to us. I think second was actually starting to look at our partnerships. Like I partner with Illumina and I partner with DNA Genotech. So like Am I choosing partners as well who are more or less like us? Then we're looking at from the product perspective of like, what is it that, the product, like it's Eurocentric in part because a lot of genetics research is very much focused on Europeans. And we do a lot, I think, to try, like as much as we are sort of 80% European, we're still sort of the largest non-European cohort out there. But what else can we do to develop products that is going to serve and appeal to other communities? And I think research, again, it's one of the things that we've thought a lot about is that winning, again, we talked about some of these things like all the different research initiatives. There's reasons why the Black community really is not trusting of the research world and understanding what is it that we can do that we might also be contributing to really win over that community and actually serve them and have an influence. So I think a lot of what we're trying to do is understand what are some of the actions that we may or may not be doing that have an impact where I think we could have we could really lead and change. I think the other thing is like microaggressions within the office place is one of those things that, again, it's a group of people who are all very well-meaning, but not necessarily aware of some of the actions that they're taking that have that impact. So I think we're on a good path, and I feel pretty good about where we are headed with it. And I think having sort of these 4 pillars about how we're going to approach, but it's going to take time to really understand just all the aspects of the company that need to change.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of people were appreciative of your very candid statement. So thank you. And thank you for a great chat. And I'm a TV reporter. I'm told I finish at 1:25. So I guess we're out of time, but thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. This was an extremely interesting conversation to listen to. We appreciate both of your leadership and insights in the healthcare industry. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, and for our viewers, please stick around for the next session that'll start in a few minutes. And remember, our Slack channel is out there where you can engage with other attendees and speakers. Thank you all.